Okay, so we're going to go on now to some composite bees. It's very exciting. Um, so these files are here in the drive. We're not going to turn them in, but you should do them because they're going to be super helpful for you when you go on to work on project 2. So go ahead and open up the bee sample demo. I'm going to show you the bee sample finished, just so you get a sense of what it should look like. So this is what we're aiming for. We want to have this bee here, which is existing, and then we have this second image of a bee back over here. Notice that it is a little bit smaller. It's also blurred, right? This bee is very sharp. This bee is blurred in a way that matches the surroundings. This is going to be super important as you are working on compositing images together, compositing yourself into something. There are always times where you are not quite the same depth of field, or the image quality varies a little bit. Certainly the scaling, making yourself bigger or smaller, is going to be super important. So let's walk through how to do it. I'm going to close that sample one, open up the demo. All right, and let's walk through. So here we have our bee. If we look over here, there is no bee there. Are there two bees? There are not two bees. Okay, so there's our bee. If we look in our layer menu, it appears on screen that we just have one bee there. But if I actually turn off that main menu, or excuse me, main layer, there is actually a second bee that is just a copy of this main layer. If, by the way, you do want to copy something and have it not move, you can copy, and then when you paste, one of your options is paste in place, and that will paste it where you just got it from instead of just putting it on some random place on the image. Okay, so we've got that bee there. If I move it around, right, we can see that it's there. Do not move it around though, because I have made your life a little easier. If you go over to your paths palette, again, that's usually here docked with layers right there, paths, you will see a path called bee outline. I'm going to let you guess what the bee outline is. When I click on it, you'll see there's a lovely red line wrapping around that bee. And I can just come down here to my marching ants, click it, load my path as a selection. There it is. And again, remember, we make our paths so that we can make a selection, so that we can make a mask. That's the whole point of doing a path, is that it's a more precise way to make a selection. So there it is, newbie, newbie. I have that layer selected. I'm going to come down here and click the Japanese flag, add a layer mask. Now I can't tell that anything has happened, right? Because the layer is identical to what's beneath it. So hiding and showing things, who knows? But if I come up here and grab my move tool, right, there it is right there. Now, if I grab that bee, whoa, look at that. It is a whole nother bee. Things with me doing the move tool right there, remember I have auto select layer active. So if you don't have that, you would need to go make sure that that bee layer was highlighted before you went and grabbed it. So got the bee, there it is. I want to put it back over here. Now to do that, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that this bee does not match the background at all. A, it's facing the wrong direction. B, it's a little bit too big. Since it's farther away, it should be smaller. And obviously, it's way less blurry than everything around it. Easy things first. We're going to go do a free transform. Excuse me. All right, with that B layer selected, edit, transform, free transform right there. So free transform, um, give these box with the handles around it. Now I could rotate the B to get it on the right side, but now it's upside down. That's just weird. Don't want to do that. So to flip it, I'm just going to grab the side handle and pull it across. Again, grab the side handle and pull it across. And I'm just eyeballing it to make sure it doesn't get too distorted. Put it over here, rotate a little bit, and then I want to scale it, right? It needs to be a little smaller. When I scale it, I hold down the Shift key. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, maybe you don't hold down the Shift key. Try it both ways, see what happens. If I hold down the Shift key and I scale it, it doesn't distort, right? I don't want to grab it and be like, oh, look, there's my weird two-dimensional B. That's great. No. Hold it down and pull it down like that. Awesome. And put it, I don't know, somewhere that makes a little bit of sense. Maybe on there. Rotate it. All right, again, remember we want it to be sort of holding on to whatever that is. Once you have it where you want, just hit return to commit to that change. And now the B's roughly the right size and roughly the right position. Certainly the right sort of side of the plant. But totally not blurry, looks ridiculous. So how do we get rid of that? So if we come down here, look at our lovely B, we want to blur it. So to blur it, I make sure that I have that B layer selected. Come up here to filter and I go to blur. There's a bunch of blur options. I want Gaussian blur. It will pop up with some default value. This is obviously too much. When you're doing this, make sure you've zoomed in. If you haven't zoomed in, you're not going to be able to see what it looks like. Who even knows what will be going on? So I'm going to dial that down a little bit. Is that right? Figuring this out is hard, right? Eyeball it, try to figure out what's going on. It's a destructive edit, so if you screw it up, you're going to need to do it again. For that reason, you might consider saving a copy of this B layer before you do these things. If I were thinking, I would have done that. I'm not thinking, and I didn't. Cool. There we go. There's our B. Zoom back out. That looks pretty good. I feel like maybe it could be a little bit more blurry. I'm going to undo, and while I'm at it, I'm going to duplicate that layer. Hide it down there. Cool. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. So Gaussian blur is going to remember my last setting by default. So I know it was 6.6. I want a little bit more. 7. That feels better. Okay, let's say that that's good. All right, that is pretty good. One thing, if we zoom in here, that you'll notice is that this was shot with a higher ISO. And so you can see that this texture surrounding the B is not there on the blurred one, right? And this is a huge problem. This happens all the time. You blur something, you go back and look at it, there's no texture. We solved it with grain. So again, to make grain layer, new layer, grain, overlay, fill with overlay, neutral color. Why, thank you. Don't mind if I do. And then once we have that new grain layer, we can go in and add noise. I think this is too much. Let's 160. What's going on there? Put way down. Now, right now, my grain layer is affecting everything in the image, which is not super helpful, right? All I want to do is blend it in this 1B into everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. I'm going to come back here to this grain layer, and I'm going to make the layer below it, which is just the B, a clipping mask. Right, so hold down Option, you'll see my cursor there. Right, changes, and I click. All right, now the grain layer is indented. Now, if I go up here and add some noise, it's going to go back to crazy levels. I can figure out something that looks realistic with what's around it, and which also isn't adding any noise to the rest of the stuff. So that, honestly, looks pretty good, right? So now we have this texture in the B, we have the texture in the surroundings. I would be hard-pressed to know that this B wasn't there the whole time. One thing that we didn't do in this sample as I was walking through it, the B in the back is maybe a little darker, so we could always brighten it up using a curves layer. Right, there is sort of more direct sun falling on things. Again, we don't want to do that to the whole image, so we come in here and indent it. And again, that's just hitting Option. We're indenting it to that new B, right? Right above it is a grain layer, also indented to the B. Anything that we have above there indented will all sort of follow the same thing. Make B brighter. Cool. And now we're done.